Hello out there guys, my name is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and welcome back to another Star Wars Sundays video. So this is, as the title suggests, my Star Wars Sundays video series where it's exactly that. Usually on Sundays I like to try and upload a video discussing what's happening with Star Wars in the current film universe and just my general theories and speculations and conversations about my favorite thing in the world, Star Wars. So this video is pretty exciting because we are literally in like the 2-week countdown until Episode 8, The Last Jedi comes out, and it is maddening to think about that we are actually that close to the release of the 8th Star Wars episodic film. I cannot freaking wait. We are finally, after more than 30 years, going to see the true return of Luke Skywalker, which is really the focal point of this video, and it's Luke Skywalker the character and the idea of his true return, because as much as I do seriously really enjoy Episode 7 The Force Awakens, I know it's controversial and people have issues, and sure, I guess it's not the most perfect Star Wars movie that you could have, but I really do love the movie. I think that there's far more good than any bad. However, there is the weird situation surrounding Luke Skywalker and his inclusion in that movie. So at this point, I can't imagine that spoiler warnings are necessary. We've all seen The Force Awakens. Everybody knows that Star Wars movie, and everyone is familiar with how it ends. All of a sudden, in the last 12 seconds of film, we finally see Luke Skywalker. After hearing his name 1,000 times, after it being literally like the first word in the first sentence of the opening crawl to Episode 7 and the promise of Luke Skywalker throughout the entire plot, the whole reason everything is set in motion is because of Luke Skywalker, and we don't get him until the very end of the film. He doesn't say a word, we're left on that cliffhanger, and the credits roll, and it's like, really? That's the Luke Skywalker return that we've been waiting for 30 years after Lucas himself reassembled the original 3 cast members to come back for a trilogy before he retired and sold to Disney, and then they started actually making the films. We only got 12 seconds, no speaking, no use of the lightsaber. So sort of what I really wanted to do was really dissect that choice and that decision by J.J. Abrams and Lucasfilm and everyone involved when creating Episode 7. And they were, of course, very smart in leaving him out of the marketing. A lot of you guys may remember when we were building up in that year of 2015, building up the hype up into the release of The Force Awakens, a lot of people started to notice, okay, well, we're seeing Han everywhere. We're even starting to see Leia. Chewie's part of the marketing, and then, of course, all the new characters. But curiously, where is Luke? And then they even revealed the final poster for the film, and there was no Luke on that either. It was very strange. You had all the new characters, you had Han and Leia, but there was no Luke. Why don't we see Luke? And there were even some quotes in interviews, and JJ and other people involved with the film, maybe even Kathleen Kennedy, I can't remember exactly, came out with some quotes, and they were saying, hey, there's a reason that you're not seeing Luke Skywalker in the marketing. All will be revealed. It's part of the story and the mystery of the film. Once you see the movie, you'll understand why there isn't any Luke. And what's really interesting, and some of you guys might find this funny, but if we dial back 2 years ago, before any of us saw The Force Awakens, we all had all these theories and mysteries about all sorts of elements of the film, including Luke. And my theory, which also is part of this whole thing with the why we weren't seeing him in marketing, is part of this theory as well. I actually thought that he was going to be dead. I thought that what they were setting up was in this new trilogy, in this 30-year time span between the end of Return of the Jedi and the beginning of The Force Awakens, Luke Skywalker had died or passed away or fallen in battle or whatever. And he was obviously going to be in the movie because Mark Hamill was cast in the film and in the trilogy. But I was thinking, okay, it's probably just going to be a Force ghost. You know, kind of what The Last Jedi might be setting up as well, where Luke is going to be an Obi-Wan or a Yoda-type character. Well, Obi-Wan in the original trilogy was only in Force ghost form once he, you know, passed away, let himself relinquish into the Force when fighting Darth Vader in A New Hope. And in 5 and 6, he was only a Force ghost. And so what I was thinking, my theory was like, oh, I bet Luke Skywalker is going to be dead, and he'll just be a Force ghost throughout this whole trilogy, talking to whoever and doing whatever. And while that was like sad to think about, I was also kind of excited because A, I wanted to be right with that crazy theory, and B, it definitely would have felt very Star Wars to do that. But of course, that's not what they did, and it was really just a case of they didn't want to reveal Luke until the end of the film so that they could set him up for the following movies. And so is that really a smart choice? Is that something that they should have done? Was that a good idea? And I go back and forth on it because, again, I do really enjoy The Force Awakens. I think it's a great Star Wars movie, and I think conceptually like the idea of teasing you with this amazing return of this element from the older films that we love, in this case, the main character, Luke Skywalker, and kind of making it this big surprise reveal thing at the end that sets up this exciting future for the rest of the trilogy. But I do think that honestly, there kind of was a huge mistake, or maybe even a huge disservice to the fans and the story and the character of Luke Skywalker, to have left him out of the movie for the entire time. I mean, it's like a 2 hour and 10 minute or 2 hour and 15 minute long movie, and we don't ever see Luke Skywalker. And when you think about how we were blessed with this new trilogy, which when Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005, I think a lot of us thought and believed, and Lucas even told us at that time, that's it. The films are done. The episodic films are over. The Skywalker story has been told. It's this 6-film arc between father and son and daughter, and like that's it. That's Star Wars. And then we'll do the other things. We'll do the Clone Wars and the you know, the novels and the games and all the other canon will continue. But the films and the Skywalker episodes are done. And then all of a sudden, you know, fortunes changed, events changed, Lucas retired, things moved forward, and we have the original 3 actors coming back for a brand new trilogy when none of us thought that was going to happen. And to have that first film, which again, I will remind you guys, I do love, but to have that first film not even be able to bring Luke Skywalker, the main character, the character that kicked off the entire Star Wars saga, like the greatest character ever, to have him not in that movie at all, just to create this goofy MacGuffin mystery and have him revealed at the end and not do a damned thing in the movie, I do have to say that at the end of the day, I find that to be a mistake. Now, of course, there's a huge caveat to all this, beyond just the caveat of I'm a fanboy and I just love Star Wars movies because I love Star Wars, but also the other caveat is we have Episode 8 and Episode 9 still to go. And Episode 8 is obviously going to focus very heavily on Luke and his past and his relationship with Rey, his relationship with the Force, what I hope, crossing my fingers, his relationship with his father post-life, in the afterlife of everything that Anakin / Vader has been dealing with since completing his story in Return of the Jedi. And so there's a lot more Luke we're going to be getting, and there's also going to be more to the story. And so there is a very good chance that by the time the trilogy wraps up, between 8 and 9, you know, when 7, 8, and 9 are its own complete story, it might not feel as much of a disservice or stabbing in the back, so to speak, to have the entire first movie of this new trilogy not actually have Luke Skywalker in it whatsoever. If they deliver properly on the character and on the story in The Last Jedi, which, I mean, we're all very optimistic for the film, so I'm sure it's going to turn out to be great and do that. And then if it wraps itself up properly with Episode 9, which I know JJ is a controversial choice, but I am a Star Wars optimist, so I'm going to believe it's going to turn out okay. And if that happens, obviously, in hindsight, in another 4 or 5 years, we'll probably be able to look back at the whole trilogy and not even really question the fact that Luke wasn't included in Episode 7, because we will have seen where the character and the story goes throughout 8 and then 9, and how the trilogy starts its story and then also wraps up and concludes its story, which also means concluding whatever arc Luke is meant to go on in this trilogy. Of course, providing he even survives 8 and has anything to do in 9, and I think that that's more a guarantee now than ever, especially because, unfortunately, the passing of Carrie. I think one of the things when that happened, once people kind of got over the tragedy of just the event itself, and then we started thinking about the character of Leia and the Star Wars movies, I think one of the things people maybe stopped thinking about is how changing the story because of her passing might also affect other characters, because it could be something where obviously we know they would have gone back to maybe change or edit some of the scenes or refilm stuff or change lines because of Carrie passing, because they knew that they weren't going to be able to bring the character back into Episode 9. Maybe one of the things they would have done, you know, the craziest idea is maybe Luke actually did pass away in Episode 8 in the initial run, and then when Carrie passed, one of the things they might have gone back to change was not having Luke pass away or be killed or die in battle or whatever in Episode 8, so that they can continue to have him alive in Episode 9. Yes, I know even if he died in Episode 8, he could still be a Force ghost in Episode 9, like I've already discussed. And that's true, and that would even be fine, but I don't really think that they maybe feel as comfortable doing that now, because they still wouldn't be able to have Leia, Carrie Fisher alive and present in Episode 9, which they basically said was going to be the plan initially. 7 was Han's film, and 8 was Luke's film, 9 was going to be Leia's film. I don't like that idea, but that is how they've basically told us they were going to be doing it anyway, so that's just the weirdness of this new Star Wars era without Lucas behind the story. I don't think he would have made a weird choice like that, but, you know, whatever. It is what it is. And so I feel like, you know, in a situation where maybe Luke was meant to pass away, like I said, maybe they changed that so that he does continue his story in 9. And so at the end of the day, it really comes down to that decision in Episode 7 to not have Luke in the film. And it's just, I can't help but feel, even still, 2 weeks before Episode 8 comes out, still feel a little bit disappointed when I think about how The Force Awakens played out, and the fact that after, you know, 10 years after the last Star Wars film, and over 30 years since the last time we saw Luke Skywalker on film, to have brought him back into this new trilogy and make these new movies, but then not have him in that very first movie, for what is probably the wrong reasons, I think it was a disservice to the fans and definitely a disservice to the character. Because I could be wrong by the time the trilogy completes itself, but it does feel a little bit like it wasn't done because it organically served the story properly. I think that it was done just because it was just a weird trickery to play on the audience, and just JJ doing the thing where it's like, surprise, I gotcha, and he infused that sort of mentality, which I do love JJ's other films, by the way, but to infuse that mentality into the already established and incredibly precious Star Wars lore and Star Wars canon in an episodic film doesn't feel right. So, you know, going on the assumption that that feeling won't change once 8 and 9 have concluded, I think that I have to state that I just personally look at it that way. At the end of the day, I'm really still okay with it because everything else about The Force Awakens, the lack of Luke is a problem to me, and I think that it was done for the wrong marketing reasons, but everything else, all of the new characters, Harrison Ford playing Han Solo again was so incredible. Loved seeing Chewbacca back. I loved the special effects. I've talked many times about how I hate the whole thing of like, ooh, it's got practical sets, and so it's cool, and it's better now than it was before or whatever. I hate that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean I don't also still like the look and feel of that. I mean, I appreciate trying to recreate the tone of the original trilogy. It was a little heavy-handed, but I do still appreciate the concept, and I think that it still was ultimately delivered on. Even as an absolute lover of the prequels, I appreciate the idea of doing that, and I liked seeing what they did. It was nice to feel back more in that world than not being that. And so, you know, they still did so many other great things. Rey is incredible. Finn is incredible. I hope that there's a lot more Poe in episodes 8 and 9. I'm excited we're going to get Phasma back and finally doing something. So, you know, I believe in the future of this trilogy. I believe in the Luke Skywalker character. I think I'm going to always question the choice to make this first movie in 10 years not have Luke in it until the end, and he doesn't say anything, and he doesn't even light up his damn lightsaber. So yeah, that's going to be it today, just me really riffing on this whole idea about Luke, and you know, it's very relevant because the next film is going to focus so heavily on Luke, and having that come off of the film where Luke had literally nothing to do except trying to get people in seats to find out the mystery of Luke Skywalker, just to find out that there wasn't anything and you had to wait until the next movie 2 years later. It's just a whole weird, crazy scenario. I wish different choices were made. I think that if Lucas had stayed on board and not retired and actually made these films once he convinced Carrie, Mark, and Harrison to come back, we probably would have had a better delivery of Episode 7 and a far better delivery of the Luke Skywalker character in that movie. I think it's going to be great in 8. I trust Rian Johnson. Mark has been very questionable about it, so that does make me a little bit nervous, but ultimately I think it's going to be great. It looks like the relationship between Luke and Rey is going to be awesome in this film. Whether it stays good or if it goes toxic, you know, I think it's going to be great regardless. So those are my feelings on Luke Skywalker so far in Episode 7 and what we might see from him as far as the rest of this new sequel trilogy. So discuss it below. I always love having a reason to do a Star Wars Sundays video. I love talking about Star Wars. Even though Rule of 2 Review is primarily gaming and Nintendo focused, I've enjoyed bringing the Star Wars conversation into the channel for the small amount of my audience that enjoys checking this stuff out. So if you do like this video, please share it. I'd like to get the Star Wars chat videos out there more into the algorithm and into the ethosphere of the internet and stuff. So, but regardless, discuss Luke Skywalker, Episode 7, Episode 8, all things Star Wars below. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.